What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com.
Here are my DFS picks for MLB Saturday, September 11th.
These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button
And hit that bell icon
so you don't miss our new videos.
In this video, I'm going to go over my top DFS picks for today's MLB slate.
And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made.
Okay guys, we have an 8-game slate tonight, so let's take a look at the pitcher position. Now before we get started, I just want to say, we've been on a roll, guys. We've been killing these picks. Now our hot streak is bound to end at some point. It's not going to go on forever, but let's see if we can keep it going here tonight. So at the pitcher position, I like Luis Castillo with a 7% pitching advantage over the St. Louis Cardinals. Luis Castillo is only giving up a .636 OPS versus righties, and he's facing 7 righties here tonight. On top of that, the Cardinals have only hit 46 of his last 186 pitches. That's a .247 batting average and a huge sample size. He's 9,900 FanDuel salary, 900 less on DraftKings, projected at 36.1 fantasy points here tonight. He has an ERA of 4.20. His record is 7-15 on the season, pitching an average of 95 pitches per game, averaging 30 fantasy points per game, and he's been on fire, scoring 40, 37, and 35 fantasy points in the last 3 games. So I like Luis Castillo here versus the St. Louis Cardinals. I also like Charlie Morton pitching against the Miami Marlins. And Charlie Morton, he's a balanced pitcher, only giving up a .683 OPS versus lefties and a .687 OPS versus righties. He's facing 4 lefties and 5 righties. On top of that, the Marlins have only hit 10 of his last 52 pitches. That's a 192 batting average. He's 9,000 FanDuel salary and 1,000 less on DraftKings. Projected at 35.8 fantasy points here tonight. He has an ERA of 3.48. His record is 13-5 on the season, pitching an average of 88 pitches per game, averaging 34 fantasy points per game. He scored 37, 43, and 30 fantasy points in the last 3 games. So I like Charlie Morton here versus the Miami Marlins. Okay, let's take a look at the catcher first base position. I like Freddie Freeman with a 54% batting advantage over Elieser Hernandez. Freddie Freeman is batting 30% better versus righty pitchers, batting a 1.083 OPS versus righties, and Elieser Hernandez, he pitches 25% worse to lefties as he does righties, giving up a .821 OPS versus lefties. And I like this pick because Freddie Freeman is 4 for 11, batting a .364 batting average and a 1.053 OPS versus Hernandez. He's 3,800 FanDuel salary, 1,600 more on DraftKings, projected at 12.5 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 12 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 9, 28, and 6 fantasy points in the last 3 games. So I like Freddie Freeman here versus Elieser Hernandez. Okay, now here's a value play. I like Jared Walsh with a 96% batting advantage over Luis Garcia. And Jared Walsh is batting 34% better versus righty pitchers. He's batting a 1.023 OPS versus righties. And Luis Garcia, he pitches his worst ball by far to lefty batters. 63% worse than his other pitches, giving up a 1.017 OPS versus lefties. Now I like this pick because Jared Walsh is 5 for 7, batting a .714 batting average and a 2.441 OPS versus Garcia. 2 of those 5 hits are for home runs. He's $2,800 FanDuel salary, $1,600 more on DraftKings, projected at 14.2 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 11 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 31, 6, and 0 fantasy points in the last 3 games. Actually, no at-bats in that last game, so just 31 and 6 fantasy points in his last 2 games. So I like Jared Walsh here versus Luis Garcia. Okay, let's take a look at the second base position. I like Ty France with a 12% batting advantage over a low salary pitcher, Humberto Castellanos. Ty France is batting 19% better versus righty pitchers, batting a .892 OPS versus righties. And Humberto Castellanos, I like that name, Humberto. He's giving up a .747 OPS versus righties. And Ty France is 2 for 4, batting .500 with a 1 OPS versus Humberto. And Ty France is $2,900 FanDuel salary, $1,600 more on DraftKings, projected at 13.2 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 10 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 10, 12, and 0 fantasy points in his last 3 games. So I like Ty France here versus Humberto Castellanos.
Real quick, guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all of our DFS tools for all sports. You can try the Position Optimizer, where you can see the top players ranked for each position. And we added a new Player Trends tool, where you can see the top salary differences between FanDuel and DraftKings. It's a really good tool to help you pick out value for the site that you're playing on. Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups.
Okay, here's another value play. I like Luis Arraez with a 52% batting advantage over a low salary pitcher, Brady Singer. Luis Arraez is batting 27% better versus righty pitchers, batting a .803 OPS versus righties. And Brady Singer, he pitches his worst ball versus lefty batters, 25% worse than his other pitches, giving up a .896 OPS versus lefties. Now, Luis Arraez is 4 for 10, batting .400 with a .955 OPS versus Singer, and he's only $2,400 FanDuel salary. He's $1,800 more on DraftKings, projected at 9.6 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 8 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 3, 0, and 3 fantasy points in his last 3 games. And Vegas thinks there's going to be 9.5 runs scored in this game, so I like Luis Arraez here versus Brady Singer. And just really quick, if you're playing on FanDuel, I don't know why they don't raise his price, but whenever Mike Moustakas is facing a righty pitcher, he's in a fantastic spot on FanDuel, batting a .803 OPS versus righties, and Miles Mikolas is giving up a .941 OPS versus lefties. Now, Mike Moustakas is only 2 for 10 versus Mikolas, but the splits are fantastic, and he's only $2,300 FanDuel salary. He's $2,100 more on DraftKings, so it's probably a FanDuel play only, but he's projected at 12.3 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 7 fantasy points per game on the season. So I think this is a nice value play on FanDuel, so I like Mike Moustakas on FanDuel here versus Miles Mikolas. Okay, let's take a look at the third base position. I like Rafael Devers with a 40% batting advantage over Dylan Cease. Rafael Devers is batting 25% better versus righty pitchers, batting a .922 OPS versus righties, and Dylan Cease pitches his worst ball versus lefty batters, 15% worse than his other pitches, giving up a .851 OPS versus lefties. Now, Devers is 0 for 1 versus Cease, and he's $3,900 FanDuel salary, $1,400 more on DraftKings, projected at 10.5 fantasy points here tonight. He's averaging 12 fantasy points per game on the season. He's been in a little slump, only scoring 0, 6, and 6 fantasy points in the last 3 games, but he's in a good spot here tonight, so I like Rafael Devers here versus Dylan Cease. I also like Kyle Seager with a 23% batting advantage over that low salary pitcher, Humberto Castellanos. Kyle Seager is batting 15% better versus righty pitchers, batting a .800 OPS versus righties, and Humberto Castellanos, he pitches his worst ball versus lefty batters, giving up a .805 OPS versus lefties. Kyle Seager is 1 for 2 with a 2.5 OPS versus Castellanos because that one hit was for a home run. He's $3,500 FanDuel salary, $1,700 more on DraftKings, projected at 13.4 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 10 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 0, 15, and 19 fantasy points in his last 3 games. So I like Kyle Seager here versus Humberto Castellanos. Okay, who do we have at the shortstop position? I like Carlos Correa, batting against Jose Suarez. Carlos Correa, he bats 6% better versus lefty pitchers, batting a .817 OPS versus lefties. And Jose Suarez, he's giving up a 1.058 OPS versus righties. Now, Correa is 2 for 3 with a 1.417 OPS versus Suarez. He's $3,500 FanDuel salary, $1,700 more on DraftKings, projected at 10.1 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 11 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 16, 6, and 13 fantasy points in the last 3 games. So I like Carlos Correa here versus Jose Suarez. I also like Corey Seager batting against Chris Paddack. Corey Seager bats 8% better versus righty pitchers, batting a .901 OPS versus righties, and Chris Paddack is giving up a .774 OPS versus lefties. But I like this pick because Corey Seager is 4 for 8, batting .500 with a 1.625 OPS versus Paddack. He's $3,700 FanDuel salary and only $600 more on DraftKings, projected at 11.2 fantasy points here tonight. He's averaging 10 fantasy points per game on the season, and he scored 6, 0, and 16 fantasy points in his last 3 games. So I like Corey Seager here versus Chris Paddack. Okay, moving on to the outfield position. I like Mookie Betts with a 36% batting advantage over that same pitcher, Chris Paddack. Mookie Betts is batting 28% better versus righty pitchers, batting a .965 OPS versus righties. And Chris Paddack, he pitches his worst ball versus righty batters, 9% worse than his other pitches, giving up a .846 OPS versus righties. Now, Mookie Betts is 2 for 2 with a 3.750 OPS versus Paddack. He's $3,900 FanDuel salary, $2,000 more on DraftKings, projected at 14 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 12 fantasy points per game on the season. He's been consistent, scoring 9, 9, and 9 fantasy points in the last 3 games, but he's in a fantastic spot here tonight, and he's one of my home run hitter picks of the night, so I like Mookie Betts here versus Chris Paddack. Okay, now here's a value play. Take a look at Jake Myers with a 3% batting advantage over Jose Suarez. Jake Myers is batting 27% better versus lefty pitchers, batting a 1 OPS versus lefties, and Jose Suarez is giving up a 1.058 OPS versus righties. There's no at-bats versus Suarez yet, but Jake Myers is only $2,200 FanDuel salary. He's $900 more on DraftKings, projected at 9.2 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 9 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 0, 0, and 32 fantasy points in the last 3 games. So I like Jake Myers as a value play here versus Jose Suarez.
If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smiggity smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for this NBA slate. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again, and good luck.